Well, welcome back to Politics in Color. I'm Brian Jenkins along with Wilmer Leon, and we are joined in the conversation by Les Rubin. He is president of Main Street Economics in Clearwater, Florida. Thanks for joining us today, Mr. Rubin.
Well, thanks for having me.
Let's jump right out there and talk about Bidenomics. This is something that affects a lot of folks, especially folks of color, people who are midstream employees of the federal government and work the regular jobs here in America. Let's talk about the impact of Bidenomics. Is it working? They say it is. What's your take?
Well, what would a politician say? Of course it works. Well, Bidenomics has not been particularly successful for our economy. The government deficits have really gotten out of control. We're definitely headed to some serious problems if we keep spending like we're spending. And that's really one of the reasons I started Main Street Economics. I want to alert and alarm the people that we're headed off the fiscal cliff if we don't somehow manage to get our fiscal policies under control. And it didn't start with Biden. We haven't had a balanced budget since Clinton. And it's just gotten progressively worse administration after administration. So the Bidenomics has not been successful in my view. It's caused the inflation to get worse. Now we're having high interest rates to fight the inflation. We do everything except get to the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem is our out-of-control fiscal policy, which is exacerbated by the out-of-control monetary policy.
What do you say to those looking at the interest rate issue, that this is not a common interest rate cause, that this is because of the supply chain problems, that the issues with inflation has been due to the supply chain as opposed to one of the more traditional aspects or causes of inflation, which is too much money chasing too few goods?
Well, there was a period when the supply chain was a problem, and that's a supply and demand issue, and that's what affects prices. That problem is gone for the most part, but now we have the interest rates trying to fight inflation, and the only way you fight inflation is by lowering aggregate demand by crunching the economy. And that's why we have the high interest rates. It traces back to the bad fiscal policy and bad monetary policy, which has grown the money supply too fast. And that's really the fundamental problem with inflation.
One more question on that, follow
Go
up
ahead,
on that.
go ahead.
Is that, so was there a problem with the Fed using interest rates to fight a problem that, because they're the Fed and the only tool they have in their toolbox is interest rates, that they were using the wrong tool to fight the problem?
Well, they created a lot of their own problem. Interest rates is a tool to fight it. But the real problem was the growth in the money supply, which is a Fed problem.
Mm-hmm.
That happened in 20 and 21 when the money supply grew, as my statistics have it, around 26% one year and around 11% one year. And so there's a lag effect going from the high growth in the money supply to inflation. So the root causes of this started at the end of the Trump administration, and then Biden's policy threw fuel on the fire.
Call me the Columbo of financial guys, but help me out here. We talk about policy and tax policies and things like that, but the thing we never hear discussed on the news at night is corporate profits. I mean, how much does that play in the whole idea of inflation and people paying more? I mean, I understand if corporates get charged, if it costs them more, they got to charge more. But you have major corporations like oil companies, for example, making record profits. And we're complaining every day about the price at the pump, and yet we're told, well, it's monetary policy.
Well, there's a lot of things that go into it, but corporate profits is necessary to keep corporations running. Are they excessive? I suppose that's in the mind of the beholder, but it's a supply and demand for oil, for example. Mm-hmm. If we were able to drill more and produce more oil and gas, then the price would come down, and their profits might decline some. But we are not in that position. And the question of corporate tax comes up all the time. Corporate tax isn't paid by the corporations, it's paid by the employees and the consumers. And what happened when we lowered the corporate tax in 2017, tax revenues from corporations went up, not down. If you're familiar with the Laffer curve, it was a perfect example of that, is that we brought in more corporations because we lowered the tax, and incentives is everything. Corporations are going to go and do what's in their best interest, just like you do what's in your best interest and I do what's in my best interest. So they're going to go where the taxes is more favorable. And Ireland is a perfect example. When they lowered their tax rates, they boomed, absolutely boomed. So we were non-competitive before. When we got competitive, we started bringing money back in. And so the tax revenues went up when we lowered the corporate tax rate. Profits, they're going to try to maximize their profits. I mean, that's part of the corporate world. And yes, they are making good profits, but their costs are going up and the prices are going up, and it's all part of the equation of how do we get to where we want to go. And we need to get good fiscal policies and good tax policies if we're going to have the right incentives and get this debt under control, which is headed towards a fiscal cliff. I mean, we're in deep trouble in this country. I've just completed a pamphlet addressing that, which is free on our website, mainstreeteconomics.org, that explains that. I'm trying to get people to wake up and understand what we need to do in order to get our economy back on sound footing.
Let me piggyback on that, because Ronald Reagan, I believe, coined the phrase trickle-down economics. How do we make that work? I mean, that's assuming corporations are doing well, then we all should do well, right?
The whole idea is supply-side economics. And if you get the corporations doing well, it's going to provide a growth in the economy, and it's going to provide jobs and income for a lot more people. So lowering the tax rate is a step in that direction. Corporations will grow, the economy will grow, and there's more jobs available at better incomes. The amount of wages people get is a matter of productivity. What do they produce for a company?
But in practice, does it work?
It has worked. It has worked. In the book we wrote just a few months ago called The Greatest Ponzi Scheme on Earth, we have a whole section that's devoted to analyzing the countries that achieve good economies and what their policies were, countries that failed and what their policies were, and it's very clear what works and what doesn't work. And trickle-down economics is basically trying to get to good, sound fiscal policy and tax policy so that we can grow the economy faster, and then everybody is benefited.
So to follow up on Brian's question, when George H.W. Bush was running against Ronald Reagan, he called trickle-down economics voodoo economics. And what we've seen since, I'll just say, the Obama administration, when a whole lot of money was pumped back into the economy, and it was expected that these corporations would take that money, use that money to reinvest into manufacturing, that what they did was bought back stock, artificially inflated their values, and so now we've got a high corporate value. If you have a 401k, you're happy as a clam, but that's not being really realized in the manufacturing side of the economy. What do you say to people that would subscribe to that logic?
Well, the voodoo economics is just political speak.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know what to make of that. The idea that we put more money into the economy does foster growth. It will do that, but at what cost? And what we're doing is we're borrowing a lot of money to finance this, and that has a lot of negative consequences besides fostering growth, where we're pushing growth, but we're also breaking the bank. And that's what's going on right now we're breaking the bank. This country cannot continue. We've got 35 trillion of debt. It's forecast to go to 55 trillion in 10 years. If there's no black swan events like a war or recession, it'll be worse than that. I just don't know how much worse.
Let me take you in a totally different direction here. There's an elephant in the room that no one in the GOP seems to be talking about, but it's a trend going on across the country, and that is about reparations. California, you may know, just passed a reparations bill, a package of bills. And, you know, the talk, I guess, among folks who are not involved in the legislation of it is about giving out checks. But that is not what they're talking about in the legislation. The legislation is about land, about real estate, about reparative investment. And I'm wondering if there's something in your Main Street plan that would accommodate that, or is this just going to break the bank?
That will break the bank, and I don't understand the logic behind all of that. We don't have unlimited funds that we can do anything we want. We do have private property, and we can have confiscatory tax rates and try to reallocate money, but that's not going to cure our problems. And neither party is really focused on the fiscal imbalance that we have right now. And that's what Main Street Economics is focused on, getting people to understand basic economics and the serious, serious problems that we're facing that neither party is addressing.
One of the elements of your program, or a major element of your program, deals with real estate. And where's the correlation in terms of the real estate markets as we see, and the problem with affordable, or what many would have experienced, unaffordable housing in this country?
Well, housing is unaffordable for a lot of reasons. One is it's a supply and demand problem. We have restrictive rules and regulations that limit the amount we can build, and we have overbearing regulations that make it very expensive to build. We need more affordable housing and that's supply and demand. Mm-hmm. If we get more housing, then the prices can get more under control. The other problem we're facing is that we have inflation, and that's causing the costs to go up, which causes the prices to go up. And we have high interest rates to fight the inflation. That means the mortgage payments are become unaffordable, and all of that compounds to make the housing market very difficult right now.
What do you say to those who will look at what happened during the COVID crisis with the high foreclosure rates in the country, and then you had corporations such as BlackRock coming in, buying up a lot of this foreclosed housing stock, but instead of putting it back on the market, they turn it into investment property, and they raise the prices. Turn it into rental property, and then they raise the price of rent.
Well, they're filling a market demand. People can't buy the houses, so investors buy them and rent them. Somebody that wants to live in a house and can't afford it, that's a better solution. The capital economy is going to have people taking advantage of the situation that exists, and yes, they do come in and they buy investments in houses, and they rent them to people that want to live in a house but can't afford it. So they're filling a gap in the market in a way, just because of the current conditions that we have right now, which are very difficult for some people.
So what would your book offer to folks, working class folks, who really don't understand this whole idea of economics in a way that policy is made? What should they look for from your book?
The book is more of a macro look at the world of the United States and the difficulties that we face. It's written by a layman, that's me, for other laymen, in easy to understand terms of what are the problems we're facing in this country. And then we go on to explain, all right, here's some of the major things we can do to fix them. We have three major areas that we have to deal with. One is entitlements, and nobody wants to touch that. We have to. It's broken. The system's broken. It doesn't work. It's economically not feasible to continue doing what we're doing. The second area is government size. The federal government was never intended to be the behemoth that it is now. You can read the Constitution, that's clear. And the third is tax policy, which is horrible. We have an unbelievable tax code of 75,000 pages when you count all of the rulings and regulations. Nobody, and it's full of special interests. We have to reform the tax code, too, to make it more equitable.
Les Rubin, thank you so much. The name of your organization again and the name of your book?
MainStreetEconomics.org. The book is called The Greatest Ponzi Scheme on Earth. And there is a pamphlet on the website you can download for free called Failure is Our Object.
Les Rubin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it. Folks, you are listening, you are viewing, you are watching Politics in Color on politicsincolor.com. We are here live at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Stay tuned. There's a lot more in store.